All right, what is going on, everybody? How you doing? Welcome to another episode of Talking Buffalo, your weekday daily driver for Buffalo Sports Talk and more. My name is Patrick Moran. Thank you very much, as always, for watching, for listening, for following, for subscribing. Appreciate y'all very much. It is Wednesday night, around 9 p.m. We're recording this on the audio side. Video side, we're actually live here on YouTube and Twitter and Facebook. I'm joined, as I usually am this time this week, by my good buddy, recurring guest, Tone Pucks. Obviously, you know where we're going with this tonight, but I do want to say right off the bat, we become like infamous, I suppose, for you showing up like 5 minutes before we start recording. You usually got a claw in hand or something. Anyway, we don't talk at all before we get down to business here. We just go live and kind of shoot the shit, see what's going to happen. I decided this week I was actually going to send you some at least talking points for the show tonight. I figure maybe I have a little bit of organization, a little bit of structure. And on the video side, I'm going to kind of put this up there a little bit to the screen. It's kind of evidence. It was like 10:54 a.m. this morning, some talking points. And the very first one says, is Stefon the architect of his own misery? He just seems miserable here. That was going to be a talking point of today's episode. Also, not to toot my own horn here, I sent a DM on Twitter to Greg Thompson from Cover One. Very well-known guy when it comes to numbers and salary cap shit. 7:55 a.m. this morning. So not even 8 o'clock this morning. Asking him about a hypothetical for informational purposes. If the Bills were to trade Stefon Diggs, what would the cap ramifications be if it would be after June 1st? I don't want to have any confusion. Long story short, this was a bombshell and shocking, but last night and early this morning, I kind of got an inkling that something was going down. Now, was it going to come today? Obviously, did not know that, but something was going down. Something was brewing, and sure enough, it did happen. The bombshell, Stefon Diggs traded from the Buffalo Bills to the Houston Texans, along with a 2024 sixth, a 2025 fifth for next year's second pick from Houston, owned by the Minnesota Vikings. The Buffalo Bills are eating $31 million in dead cap space this year. Making this trade, for the few people who might not know this right now already, the Bills actually lost money against the cap with this trade. ESPN Stats and Info put it out there. It's the highest dead money single season charge for a non-quarterback in the history of the NFL ever. Let's start here, I guess, with the obvious. What was your reaction immediately? What are you laughing at already? What was your...
Jeez, it took forever for you to get to me.
Well, not everybody's watching this. Some people are listening, and they got to kind of set it up.
Yeah, fine.
What was your instant in the moment reaction? And now, as we're recording this nighttime, probably 9 hours or so later,
all kinds of time, all kinds of time to process it, and that, I believe, is where you're going to get the best version of me today ever on one of your podcasts, despite the lack of preparation. All right. I'm coming in like Prince, all right, doing the solo in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame while my guitar gently weeps and shit. And he barely even practiced. You know what I'm saying? Or rehearsed, I think is what we would say. Had a lot of time to think about it. I started with a wow. Okay. The first, I got your text that you were sending the email with some talking points or some other text this morning. All right. And then within minutes of that text, well, that just got blown up, by trade. And you didn't mention Diggs. You didn't mention anything. You didn't say, whoa, you know what I mean? You had no, big exclamations or anything like that. So I shot over to Twitter and it was a banger, man. It was a banger. So
15 minutes later, 15 minutes after I sent you that email,
first reaction was a big wow, like many. Then early in the processing stages. All right. Because honestly, I thought there were going to be a lot of layers to the financial, ramifications with the cap and things. I thought there were going to be a lot of complex layers that the Greg Thompsons of the world simply didn't know. All right. That allowed us, to alleviate some of that big number. And Well, that ended up not being the case. There were no layers. It was just as everybody thought. But here's the thing, man. Here's a reaction that I got to pretty early on. All right, as I thought about it, mostly just disappointed in myself for not doing the simple math involved that put the number in question at 4 million, not 31 or whatever. All right. If I simply would have sat down and said to myself, all right, it's not like everybody heard that big ass dead number. So, we heard that and we're like, that's just a no. There's no 31 million. But I don't know that we did a good enough job. All right, collectively, all of us, Bills fans, Twitter, whatever. All right, of saying to yourself, here's what it really is, man. It's 4. It's 4 not to play for you. All right. It's 4 not to play for you, which is basically what everyone was willing to do next year anyways. All right. And then that wasn't enough. All right. 4 not to play for you ain't gonna move the needle enough, man. That's bad, asset management. But they worked on shit. All right. They worked on shit and found their way to a 2 to do it a year early. And we are way undervaluing the asset that they got. All right. The things that they had to throw in for that asset should be proof of the work that went into guaranteeing you got a 2. And you got what is likely to be their better 2, right? The Minnesota 2.
Yeah.
All right. Brandon Beaton did some work to get you that 2. And I think it was absolutely right. I think it was absolutely the right move now that I've had time to think about, the dollars involved in it and what the asset, here's the biggie, right? What the asset could be used to do in the upcoming draft.
Sure.
Huge. Absolutely huge to have that asset now. Is it that asset itself? Is it the number 2 that, gets you there wherever you want in that receiver sweet spot? I don't know. Maybe it's the willingness to go your 1, all right, and jump in on one of the big 3. Everything is in play now.
Sure.
Everything is in play now for the Diggs replacement at a very high level, and no small accomplishment here. All that dead that we thought we were going to eat next year when the best we would have gone into free agency thinking about doing is retaining Spencer Brown and fucking Greg Rousseau. Now there's big chunks of change in play with your quarterback locked up. Man, this move works. Period.
Well, I'll agree with you for sure on this much. From the moment it happened to now, I agree with you about the asset that they got back. I think that was significant. At first, I'm like, man, they got a 2nd round pick, which again, even that in itself wasn't bad. But then it was like, it's next year. Like, what's that going to do? GMs consider a 2nd in the following year, pretty much like a 3rd for this year. That's the way the saying has always went.
But the 1, but it puts that 1 in play, man. And
sure.
GMs love next year 1s. They love next year 1s.
Sure.
I think, you're right. All right. And obviously there are charts for this shit. I'm sure there's a big difference between a number 1 and a number 2 next year. All right. So, it's hard to say whether the 2 could be packaged and really move you much more than maybe 28 to 22. You know what I mean? Well, something like that. But I think Brandon Beane might be willing to do that, probably without next year's 2, but he might want to do something like that. But now he can also go big, man. Now he can also go big. And there's a ton of flexibility now for a loaded group of receivers. And instead of saying, well, it's because it's so loaded, I'm going to be okay somewhere in the 4 to 6 range. Now you've got the ammunition to go get somewhere between, maybe the 2nd to the 4th best in this draft.
In terms of asset,
and probably they'll be better than that player will be better than Stefon Diggs by midseason. Okay. that player will be better than Stefon Diggs by midseason, probably.
Come on.
The way that Diggs was playing, all right, at the tail end of last year. If you swing for the fences and go get into the top 10, all right, it is not unreasonable to think that you can grab yourself a rookie that by midseason with 8 games with Josh Allen under his belt, all right, is a bigger weapon than 31-year-old Stefon Diggs will be at the halfway point in next year.
Well, that's
real, man.
That's not unreasonable.
That's real.
I'll say this. In terms of what they got back, Keenan Allen got traded to Chicago just a couple weeks ago, and the Bears only had to give up a fourth to get him. So good asset in return there. Also, getting that Vikings second next year is pretty big. The Vikings are either going to have Sam Darnold or a rookie quarterback this year. You got to figure it's going to be somewhere in the top half of round 2, as opposed to if they have gotten Houston second rounder this year, or I should say next year, that's probably going to be a lower pick. You would think Houston was going to be good. So I do agree with you when it comes to getting the asset back, but just in terms of the money, and you are right about like roughly $4 million more, but it still is. They're still paying a $31 cap hit for Stefon Diggs to not be in Buffalo this year. He was, when you woke up this morning, they were paying that and he was here. And now you're paying an extra 4 on top of that and he's not. So I guess it's kind of how you define that. But over the cap was fantastic at managing contracts and salary cap stuff, all that. Said it pretty much. This was just a disaster extension for Stefon Diggs for the Bills. They wound up paying an extra $20.9 million in 2022 and 2023 to come away with net of a less than a second rounder next year. Brandon Beane talked about it today, which did you get a chance to listen or watch his presser?
I heard the whole thing.
There was, you could tell that to an extent, Brandon Beane, I think, is usually pretty forthcoming. He was really guarded and dancing around a lot of the questions during his press conference. He did mention Josh Allen, and he said that Josh Allen, he hasn't talked to him since the trade, but he talked to him some before the trade.
Josh Allen absolutely knew it was coming.
Do you think he knew it was coming?
He absolutely knew it was coming. For Brandon Beane to even bring it, bro. All right, for Brandon Beane to even bring that up to Josh Allen in offseason talks and then not do it and turn around and, Allen has to carry that through, that knowledge through the next season and shit like that. I mean, it wasn't going to happen. The minute Brandon Beane said it to Josh Allen, it was basically, it was happening.
Yeah, okay.
Josh Allen knew it was happening.
Yeah. I don't disagree with you there. Again, in terms of money, you mentioned this too. The Bills next year, so they're eating all the money this year. Like Brandon Beane is taking all the medicine. When I sent a message to Greg early Wednesday morning, I was thinking that I think it's more realistic for the Bills to trade or cut Stefon Diggs than people are thinking right now based on some information. But again, after June 1st, you spread it out over 2 years. It would have been 22 and then like 9 the year after. Bills are taking all that medicine right now. So in terms of the cap, $27.3 million they will get to the cap next year. As of now, they'll be under the cap, and that's with Josh Allen having a $45 million cap hit next year. So financially, it's going to be significant. But I'll say this, and do you agree? It feels to me with this trade, and more on Stefon in a few minutes here, but the Bills were desperate almost to get this guy off the team. You feel that way? I mean, the question might be why, that we don't know for sure, but it feels obvious that at this point to make this trade on April 3rd and eat all that cap money now, that this team was desperate. They had enough of it. All the antics, the tweets, the stuff that we don't see, that we don't know about. Tim Graham wrote a little bit about this today in The Athletic. It just felt like the Bills were at their breaking point with Stefon Diggs. You feel that this is more than just an aging football guy who costs a lot of money, and let's reset this team right now, this position. Do you agree? No?
Yeah, well, I don't want to, I don't want to give too much credit to a Twitter account that last night said, Terry Pagula was executive meetings past midnight or whatever. I'm absolutely botching the wording of it, but did you see ranting Ron talk about, hey, look, Joe quote tweeted it, so that's how I knew. Look, Pegula was in town. All right, that's all I'm saying. Pegula was in town, and whether or not last night was any sort of final face-to-face conversation about it, I don't know. But somewhere along the line of the big decision makers, I don't know if it goes beyond just like the big three. Is it just the big three? Is it Terry Bean and McDermott? Probably. But somewhere along the line of the big three, all right, 2 out of 3 of them said, we're moving on. And if that means the Bills got tired of the act or whatever, it could have really been just a true team effort in deciding it amongst the big boys, man. And there's 3 big boys. And they came to the conclusion that it was time. And I think a lot of people, all right, the more I think of some of the comments Terry Pegula's made through the years, I think a lot of people probably feel like once Pegula started driving it, it was going to pick up that second guy needed. It probably ended up being all 3. I think all 3 of the big decision makers ended up in agreement on it.
Were you joking about ranting Ron? Actually, giving that dude credit for saying because Pegula was here past midnight. If he was trying to say something, he would be talking about the Sabres firing Don Granado. Look, he's been saying that for a couple days. It was apparently.
A lot of people jumped onto the fact. Look, man, here's like, listen, bro. All right, the owner ain't fucking around much, okay? And everybody wants to know what he's got to think about, what he has to say about everything.
Yeah.
So when the owner's in the building, it becomes news right away. And then when rogue as he may tend to, throw darts at the wall sometimes be, all right, Rantin Ron said, all right, that, Pegula stayed in the building in with important people past midnight.
Kevin Adams weighing in on the Stefon Diggs trade too or something?
No, but Brandon Bean could have easily been in the arena. Pegula could have shot out there, or they went and ate somewhere.
Sure.
I mean, these fellas did more than a fucking Zoom call to decide to move on from someone. All right, with the with the history with the franchise like Stefon Diggs. He's a beloved Buffalo Bill, man. All right. Owner's got to weigh in on that shit.
Sure. let me say this too. The Athletic reported that Joe Biscaglia from The Athletic reported that Houston reached out with an offer on Tuesday, and the Bills overnight made the decision to do this. Here's what I'm going to tell you that I heard, and I truly believe this to be true. This to me is extremely reliable. Stefon Diggs asked for a trade weeks ago. Stefon Diggs has wanted out for a while. Stefon Diggs does not like playing for Sean McDermott. These are things that I've heard, and I truly believe them. Okay, I believe them to be true. He did not like playing for Sean McDermott. He asked for a trade. In fact, Brandon Bean didn't deny that today during the press conference as well. I'm pretty sure he was asked at point blank if Stefon asked for a trade, and he skirted around the question. Did not want to ask it directly. So this might have been something that they might have decided in the last, maybe they got other offers or at least inquiries, and maybe in the last 12 to 24 hours, they finally decided to pull the trigger. But this is something that's been brewing for a while. And I'll tell you one other thing that I've heard, and I've been saying this isn't the first time I'm saying this, the disconnect between Stefon Diggs and the Buffalo Bills, because a lot of people are wondering, how the hell did things get to this? This guy for 4 years he's put together the greatest 4-year stretch among any Bills receiver ever, literally. That Bengals game 2 years ago that they lost, the lack of preparation in his mind, they weren't prepared. They weren't ready to play. And some from a team standpoint, some from an individual standpoint. And it kind of, exploded there. And just the way Sean McDermott does things with players, and him included, just didn't sit well. And I'm not saying who's right or who's wrong. I'm just telling you what I heard from, I'll call it a reliable source, that Stefon Diggs, for a while, he's been, his cryptic tweets that we thought were just cryptic tweets. They were more than that. He did not want to be here. So I don't know how you feel about that, but this is not something that just transpired over the trade itself might have happened over the last 24 hours, but this is not something that just happened over the last couple of days.
Two pretty good camps then, man. All right. I know, maybe Stephen A had the inclination with, a lot of those reports. People were dismissive of a lot of those reports.
Yeah, he was right.
But regardless, Stephen A was probably getting it from a player source.
Sure.
Both camps did a pretty good job. Steph was just doing his thing, what Steph does, what Steph did last year, and still came back. All right. And you didn't really hear that the camps were working on it. I feel like both. That's it. That's really that's the end of the point. I say that's a good job by the teams and the players camp. All right. Keeping it down. I don't think, Houston's offer was necessarily the start. I think they probably had been fielding them up until this point. I think they probably knew exactly, all right, what they were looking to do. Just off seasons, sure. I think are pretty close to being mapped out even before they start sometimes. Man.
I think Stefon Diggs was a good soldier last year. Like he played, he was enthusiastic about being here when he was on the field.
He wasn't going to do it again.
When he wasn't
ready to do it again.
Right, exactly. He said the right things when he had to. He was a good soldier. He missed one mandatory mini camp practice, but aside from that, it was never an issue over the summer. He spoke on the first day of camp last year. I remember that very well. Had a great start to the season, and halfway through, they switched coordinators, and he just kind of got lost along the way. Some of that system, some of that maybe him as well. Who knows? But the difference between this year and last year is I think Stefon Diggs knew a year ago it was just not going to happen. There was not going to be a trade. First of all, I was a year younger. Secondly, last year, the Bills would have ate like $50 million in cap money, dead cap money, if they would have done what they just did today and traded him a year ago for whatever they would have gotten. So it was not even, economically even feasible. But you're right. The guy's going to turn 31 years this season. His play did drop off in the back half of last year. And
nobody was even thinking about wanting to carry him beyond next year. The only reason people weren't talking about moving on now was financial ramifications. All right. And when you can get something back for those financial ramifications, it better to be a year too early than a year too late.
Agreed.
And now you've got all this freaking relief coming on the back end of it right now. You're probably going to be done with Bond next year and have to eat that. But we thought they'd be eating Bond and Diggs next year.
Yeah.
All right. Now $25 million just got freed.
27.
Year.
Yeah. Whatever, 27. Yeah. It's a lot of money, man. Any way you look at it.
That's not nothing in this. All right. It's the fact that you put themselves in a position to be able to just eat it this year and fill with a heavy draft class and then be able to open the books back up next year. This is as seamless a move from one franchise Hall of Fame. Fuck it. I'm ready to do that right now. One Hall of Fame quarterback's window to his next window. Okay?
Sure.
That is what the Bills are doing right now. I'm going to put Josh Allen in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I've thought about that for, I never wanted to just, make it a big statement or anything like that. But I'm like, this kid's on the way to being a Hall of Famer.
Well, he definitely is.
But
one thing I don't think you're right about is they got a second rounder next year for sure. But I don't think they're rich. They're rich with the amount of draft picks they have right now, which now is 10. It was 11. But they only got 1 first and 1 second this year, and they don't even have a 3rd round pick this year. Now, they could dip in the next year for sure.
I think strongly
absolutely
that they're gonna. I think
Look, Brandon,
strongly that they're gonna.
when there's been obvious things, I feel like when it comes to the Bills, I don't want to get too helter-skelter here because I kind of want to get to the Bills, the outlook after this. But I will say this, since we're on the point now, if there's something that seems obvious with Brandon Beane, he addresses it and he does it. Like the 1 year defensive end seemed glaring, and they took 2 straight defensive ends in the draft, Rizzo and then Boogie. They needed a corner in 2022, and McDuffie went 1 pick before them, and then they ended up with Kyrie Elam. Everyone knew a corner was coming that year. I feel like it's obvious now. Which is funny. I just did a mock draft and dropped it on Wednesday morning. That lasted a good 5 hours before I got shot to hell because I took an edge guy in the first round. I don't see that happening anymore, despite what Brandon Beane might have said about his draft value chart. I think that's all a bunch of bullshit. The Bills are definitely taking a receiver very, very, very early in this draft. So anyway, my point was, when it seems very obvious what Brandon Beane's got to do, he's going to do it. You know what I mean? So
yeah, no, that tends to be true. Sometimes though, he will throw you a curveball on something that you don't think he is in the market for. And I go back to Kincaid. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Like there may have not been anything glaring at that position. Like there wasn't anything where we were looking at that saying we've got to fill this hole with this position. But he's capable of throwing you that curveball for a player or a position that you don't think is on his radar. But look, I am a hardcore Bean. I was about to say McBean, and you could probably put McDermott in it too, although he's got more warts. I'm a hardcore Bean backer and fan, and if I ever find myself on the fence about something, I'm usually going to hedge to the side of, I just think this guy's an exceptional NFL general manager. And maybe that, maybe that does kind of affect how I, how I look at something, but I don't think so. I don't think so.
Well, let me ask you this. You could say eroding talent might be a skill set, might be part of the reason why they decided to make this move now, why they think it might be okay to eat this money now, set up for the future. Right now, at this moment, as we record this, the Bills are a worse football team than they were when you and I woke up this morning. I mean, that to me is not even debatable. How much do you think it's that, or how much you think there was a legitimate threat of chemistry issues in the locker room? Again, things that we're not really privy to. I mean, I think it got to a point. I think this is not a source. This is me saying before I said a source. There's no source. This is me thinking this was going to be an issue. Way worse than it was last year. If he would have not gotten traded, I think this was going to be a problem for Sean McDermott, maybe even a problem for Josh Allen, which I think the Stefon Diggs, Josh Allen relationship, for whatever reason, was very wishy-washy. Like what you saw in public wasn't always what you see behind the scenes. Like they were boys at times, and then they had some rifts. I don't know how common that is with other wide receiver ones and quarterbacks around the league, so I don't really have a basic comparison, but it was wishy-washy. You think that's legit though? Like chemistry, can really seep into the locker room and cause a problem. If this guy's really unhappy, he really wants to be out, he's going to make that much more known this time around.
Yeah. And I mean, I want to stop short of using, the cancer word with regards to he, would have become a locker room cancer. I think that's harsh on. That's not fair. That's when, defenders of Steph step in and say, well, that's just not who he's been. You know what I mean? We're talking about a hypothetical. Is that what Steph would have become this year? All right. But he hadn't done it yet.
Sure.
So it's like, that's when, people kind of come to his defense. And I am fine with that. I am fine with that. But I do think as the roster starts to really turn over and, a new set of leaders, a new set of leaders emerge and a new set of contributors, all right, arrive, even on the defensive side of the ball, guys like Mike Edwards, shit like that. You know what I mean? They don't need to see a quarterback, two of the most important people on your team in your locker room, all right, wearing letters on their jersey. They don't need to see them not getting along. All right, it hurt. It does hurt.
Yeah.
All right, it does hurt. And yeah, man, that's a factor.
You said a couple times recently, you're not a glass half full guy, but then you would have a positive outlook on something on the show over the last few weeks. You want to have that approach right now. When Joe Brady took over the Bills last year, down the stretch, the Bills were 6-1, and they averaged 27 points per game, with Stefon having a lesser role in this offense. 34 catches for 315 yards, just one touchdown during that 7-game stretch to end the regular season, and the Bills won. That's the rosy colored glass outlook. You could also look at it this way, though. Khalil Shakir gave credit to Stefon Diggs and saying the coverages that he was getting was helping other guys on the team get open, a lot easier. They're getting a lot more single coverage. I don't know. It's tough to balance. You have faith in Brandon Beane, and I do, but man, it's a lot of turnover on this football team.
Who's a big piece to this that's not getting mentioned enough today, as far as a grouping with Stefon Diggs, is Gabe Davis. All right. Diggs doesn't, we don't, you look at that wide receiver room now and you start to feel the loss of Gabe Davis that much more too. Okay. Because
I've wondered about that.
Your alphas now. It's just the fact that Davis was your 2. Now it's 1 and 2. I think that's it. That's what I want. Forget about even the fact that it's Gabe Davis. All right. What I remembered today as we lost our number 1 was that our number 2 also walked. Okay. And that's when I stepped back and I'm like, whoa, what's that's what the national people look at and say, whoa, wait a minute.
Oh, the window's closed.
The 4 touchdown dude in the in Kansas City and Steph Diggs. And they're like, who's he throwing the ball to? They don't people that ain't Bills followers ain't like, oh, they're throwing it to Curtis Samuel and that Shakir looked good. Nah, that's us. That's us. And that's maybe some smart people out there who follow the Bills, sure, a little more in depth. But to the lay fan, that's number 1 and number 2. Good ass 1 and 2 on a consistent playoff football team who have shined in front of our eyes, all right, on, primetime games for the last 4 years. That's what has people thinking, who's he going to throw the ball to? I think we know. All right. I think we've got a quiet confidence. All right. Those of us that follow the team and care about the team, I think we have a quiet confidence that Dalton Kincaid is a real weapon to throw the ball to. Khalil Shakir is an emerging player in this league. And Curtis Samuel is, a very good football player as well, who's never had a quarterback. All right. They left themselves with one piece that they have to add. And, instead of having the luxury of having Steph and allowing this player to come at his own speed, well, now we might want this player to produce even quicker than otherwise, which I think is more likely if you move up. Something that we haven't talked about today. Most people haven't talked about today, but should get to is, you're right. You mentioned that there could be growing pains with this, new passing attack. I'm very, very interested in the start of the Bills' schedule this year. I'm very, very interested to see, all right, if we can get some softer games early on as this group, tries to get clicking by the midway season. I do not want to see our toughest opponents out of the gate, because, I think we'll miss Steph at times early, but I think who's ever out there in his place, and if we're talking about a healthy trio behind that person of Samuel, Shakir, and Kincaid, Josh's weapons will be as good as they've ever been.
I suppose it doesn't really matter too much now at this point because the trade's been done. But I'm left wondering, and I'm going to be wondering about this for a while. And I don't know if it's the player personally, or the system, or the organization, the head coach. And I'm left wondering about some of the things that Tyler Dunn has written about Sean McDermott over the last couple of years. I'm left wondering about just Stefon Diggs as a person, as a teammate. But why is he so unhappy in Buffalo? Like, what was it that made him unhappy? Because you look at all these things here. He was the undisputed number one wide receiver on this football team. He rewrote the team record book in 4 years. He literally rewrote the team record book. Fans loved him. Bills Mafia loved him, or at least they wanted to anyway. He got a great contract and an extension. He played with one of the elite true quarterbacks, one truly elite quarterback in the NFL, among the top 2 to 3 quarterbacks in the entire league. He played on a team that won. I mean, every year since he came here, the Bills won. They won a division, and they won at least one playoff game every year. So why? Why do you think Stefon Diggs? I mean, it's a guessing game. You don't know. I mean, I'm being rhetorical here, but why was Stefon Diggs unhappy? Why did it come down to this? Was his relationship with Sean McDermott or other people in that building, or maybe even Josh for that matter, that bad that he just wasn't happy? It's hard to make sense of all this right now. I guess that's where I'm
all
going.
Right, well, put it into I know we try not to do this. Well, I don't try not to do this, but like, guys on the radio and stuff like that often try to stay away from this comparison, but just put it in the layman's terms, man. All right. My man just did not like where he worked anymore. All right. My man's just did not like where he worked anymore. And the other thing that I think has to be in play is, there was a lot of blame, I think, following 13 seconds. A lot of anger, a lot of blame. All right. They no one could do it publicly.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And I think that's the type of loss that some professional athletes simply cannot move on from. All right. When it comes to guys who fucked their chance of a Super Bowl. And do you think it's that, crazy to think that some guys on that team felt like, what the fuck just happened, man? I mean, I know it wasn't, the AFC Championship game, but it's like, how did you just do that? There was a lot of blame probably directed at McDermott. Absolutely. Who else would it be directed at?
Yeah.
All right. A lot of dudes just didn't get over that shit. That's what it felt like to me. It felt like 13 seconds just crippled this group, as it should. It crippled us as a fan base. We never stopped talking about 13 seconds.
Well,
what do you think? They just shut,
I think you're right for sure, but everything I've heard was the Bengals game was worse in terms of how he felt after the game.
Yeah.
Because of that was just, they didn't come out ready to play that game. They weren't ready to play. They weren't on the same page. The quarterback, the receivers, not on the same page. There's a lot of shit going on. And I just feel like that was like almost the breaking point of him being happier, which, by the way, I want to read this now. Again, we're doing this live on the video side. Stefon Diggs just quite literally right now just put up a post on Instagram. I'm looking off to the side so I can read it. He said, I can't begin to express the amount of love and respect I have for the city of Buffalo for the best years of my life. The city welcomed me with open arms. I'm forever grateful for you and the Buffalo Bills organization. Something special was built over these years with some very special men that will always have a place in my heart. Bills Mafia, so many great memories created throughout the years. Those games were crazy because of you. Sadly, good things come to an end until we meet again. Number 14. All right, fine. You know what? He just said more. He said more in that Instagram. He said more in that post.
That shit was dope. That was, I am a huge fan of him putting that out there. That meant a lot to me.
Why? compared to his tweets. Like literally 24 hours ago, he was. Look, I don't want to say. By the way,
the tweets were just all in the game, bro.
Mm.
The tweets were just all in the game. All right,
they were more than cryptic now, though. They were more than cryptic tweets. By the way,
yeah, and he dogged the quarterback, and he, like I said, things ain't right with the quarterback, man. They just haven't been. That really worked for me. That really worked for me. I'm glad that he issued that. I just am.
Well,
because
sure.
I personally have struggled with Steph. Okay, I've not been a Steph defender. I think he's acted like an asshole, and I think that's okay to say. Some people don't think that's okay to say because a lot of people who are saying it are saying it for a lot of the wrong reasons. But I think Steph's been acting like an asshole.
I've been the opposite, man. I have been pro Steph. All the tweets, I'm like, the national media don't know shit. They're just, again, they don't know Buffalo and yada, 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 yada. Again, the dude wanted out, man. Now, one thing, and maybe another episode, this could be
to want out of workplace.
We could talk down the road maybe about circling back around Sean McDermott and the relationship with them, or, with him that just really drained it. But, all right, so you got a guy, again, he's going to be 31 this year. He's not the same player that he once was. But, dude, here's the crazy part to me. Again, I can't understand why he got so unhappy when I listed all the reasons for you would think he'd be happy. 4 years with the Bills, 445 receptions, 4th all time, 5,372 yards, 4th all time, 37 TVs, 4th all time in just 4 years. Yet, this guy went from somebody who might go down as the greatest Bills receiver of all time, somebody who maybe goes on the wall someday, maybe somebody who you don't even see a number 14 being worn again, to this. It ending like this in April. What's your memory? I know what your memory is going to be. What's the memory going to be right now when people look back 10, 15 years from now and think of Stefon Diggs? Are they going to think of all these great highlights on the field? Or are they going to be like, this douchebag forced his way out of Buffalo during the prime of Josh Allen's football career?
No, I'm certainly not going to be the latter. I'm going to look back at it and be like, damn, man, those teams were dope. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just going to put it, like how I might be looking at an 80s team that couldn't get over the hump. You know what I mean?
I'm just
going to look back and be like, yo, those teams were dope. But to some of the things that you said, going on the wall, how it'll be remembered, things like that, man. That's one thing that Diggs probably loses out on, and probably could care less. By the way, his
legacy.
Yeah. I don't think there'll be much of one.
No.
You know what I mean? I think if they look, well, okay, like this, okay. If the Bills never do anything better than they did with Steph Diggs, then this team's going to be honored like in 20 years. You know what I mean? Like every 5 years, they'll honor this team.
The drought breakers.
They don't, whatever they are. You know what I mean? But if the Bills go on and win the Super Bowl and they're going to honor the guys that were there then. And, what kind of day does Diggs get? Quite possibly not much of one. And so what? That's just the way it goes sometimes. 4 years probably ain't enough to get your love when you hang him up.
He was on his way, though. That's what I'm saying. He was better than Reed or Molds or anyone ever during that 4-year stretch.
I'm not ready to give him better than Andre Reed, and somebody called
4-year stretch. I'm saying not. No, I won't look. No. I'm with you. Andre Reed's the greatest.
Yeah.
A 4-year stretch.
Let me tell you what I'm going to remember about Steph, man. The best catcher of the football I've ever seen. Okay, that's the first thing that just comes to mind. If the ball was being thrown to Stefon Diggs,
sure,
he was catching shit that I just saw other guys get knocked out of their hands for the last 15 years.
Ironic because of how his career ends.
How it ends.
Though.
Yeah,
he
how it ends on
a
big drop. And the fumble, too, man. How about the fumble, out of the gate? But before that, man, your man didn't fumble. I caught a lot of balls in a lot of traffic and never fumbled the ball.
Sure.
Okay? His ball security and his ball catching ability were as fun to watch. I know a lot of people say the routes, but I'm not an all 22 guy, so it's only what I would see, if they break it down on TV with a route, you know what I mean? And I know the routes, he's a very special route runner in his, in his prime as well. But I'll remember the catches, man. My man just snagged everything he could get his hands on.
Sure.
And I loved it.
I
loved it.
Brandon Beane during his press conference seemed about as he was fighting being gloomy. Let's just put it that way. This is the first time where we could have a conversation in early April where this team on paper is undisputably worse than it was the year before. 2018 had to get rid of a lot of people.
Fighting being gloomy.
I think he was.
Like, he wasn't sad to, he's got a plan. He
has no choice.
He knows his roster is going to be fine.
Okay.
I think he knows his roster. All I'm saying is he did not look like a beaten man today. All right. He probably had put in a lot of work, a lot of PR bullshit.
All right,
and he had to very carefully craft his message today.
All right, that's fair.
But I don't think he's nervous about how he's going to replace the production, because the production, as you alluded to, in one of your earlier, I'd say, comments, but on average, they're going about 7 minutes, per breath.
Are you kidding
and I'm
me?
one to talk, right?
I was going to say,
I'm one to talk. But honestly, man, I think when you look at that production, and you're also talking about the very best version of the Buffalo Bills last year. You're not just talking about a random 6 games at the end of the season. You're talking about the very best version of the Buffalo Bills last year. All right, happened when Steph kind of was an afterthought.
Sure.
So I'm not saying it's because Steph was an afterthought, because you also started running Josh Moore, stuff like that, things that you're not going to do at the start of a season when you're trying to, get a new group in there. So there were a lot of things that went into Steph's production dropping a little bit.
All right.
But the facts are the facts, man. All right. The Bills played their best football of the year without major contributions from Stefon Diggs.
Okay, well, regardless of the mood that Brandon Beane was in during his press conference, my point was, this is the first time since 2018 where on paper this team is not better. Let me say, I agree with you. They're not done. And Brandon Beane kept saying that. And they're not done with the draft either. I mean, he went out of his way multiple times to talk about the summer, adding to the roster. They're going to get more money on June 1st. They're far from done. But right now, as we are doing this podcast, all right, they have lost Stefon Diggs. They have lost Gabe Davis. They have lost Mitch Morse. They have lost Jordan Poyer. They have lost Micah Hyde. They have lost Trey White. They have lost Leonard Floyd. That's a lot of losses to your personnel. And they've added Curtis Samuel, Mike Edwards, Austin Johnson, Matt Collins. So it's not like they haven't added anybody. But right now, on paper, this team is inferior to what it was a year ago. Do you agree with that as things stand?
Sure.
Going into the draft, at least, anyway.
Only because they have a gaping hole at wide receiver 1. Okay. Other than that,
all right, before today, I thought they had a hole at wide receiver 2 before today. Now they got a hole at 1 and 2. A lot of people were saying Curtis Samuel is kind of their gadgety guy. He's going to line up in the backfield, slot outside.
That is not Curtis Samuel, especially today. Let me tell you, if you're a fantasy guy, all right, the biggest stock today,
sure,
to me, is Curtis Samuel
and Dalton Kincaid.
Yeah,
and James Cook.
I think Samuel's
and Khalil Shakir. Basically, every fucking one. Stock is going up.
I think Samuel's going to do a lot of things. All right. From the receiver position. I think he's going to catch a lot of footballs, but whether it's that or gadgety stuff, hey, here let's use him for the gadgety stuff while draft pick 1, all right, gets going, and then we're gonna start to open it up a little bit more. I think there's a lot of weapons. And now without Steph, there is suddenly an opening to craft that final weapon from scratch. Whereas Steph was not, from scratch. Steph was going to be what he was in terms of, growing limitations
Sure.
on the football field. Now you have the potential to add something in your mold, whatever it is you want, speed, size. I think it's going to be size. I think size
and run after the catch
is going to matter here.
Run after the catch. Bubble screen guy, big guys who can catch the ball short, make somebody miss.
But if you
not Stefon Diggs' strongest suit. He hated screen passes.
Believe that by adding a 2 next year, they feel more comfortable using a next year asset to move up for a stud, then you cannot be mad at this trade. Now, if you just think that the Bills are going to go out, sit there at 28 and grab that same receiver that they would have grabbed had Steph still been in Buffalo, or even skipped on receiver, all right, because Steph was here and went defensive end or something like that.
Like I did today.
If you just think that they're doing the same old shit, then I get it. I get it. You know that I don't think that makes us better, but I think the asset acquired today puts them in a position to be very aggressive on draft day this year. And if we know anything about Bean, it's that, you know, he likes to be. He is aggressive. And anytime he has ever stocked draft picks, which
he's went up.
He uses them bitches, man.
All the time. You know, I talked about the defensive ends. I talked about drafting Elam.
He was going to do it with Allen.
I mean, I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Josh Allen, it was obvious he was going quarterback. We didn't know who. I think it's obvious they're looking to do the same thing now with receiver.
Yeah, really. That's a good point. It's really just a Josh Allen pick all over again. We're about to go get Josh Allen's wide receiver 1 for the next 10 years.
I hope so. I'll say this
that's
much.
What you're shooting for.
I think the reaction between the moment it happens and several hours later is shock. Holy shit, I can't believe this happened too. Let's wait and see what happens with the draft before we go evaluating this trade. Because if they don't do anything except go get a mid-round guy to develop, then I'm really not going to like this trade. If they do something and get a guy early, different story.
There's a big swing coming, man.
There is. Listen. So
the draft has got so much more fun, bro. I mean, like way more fun. The Bills will be all over the place. Here's something. Sorry, can you hold your thought? Are you going to remember whatever it is you were about to say?
I was about to go over ammunition, but go ahead.
One shocked me, kind of like they did with the Cordy Glenn move. One shocked me if the Bills found a way to get just an inch up, just a little bit more. But I don't know that they have what it would take there.
No,
like Cordy Glenn got him from like the 20s into the teens. Can we make one tiny?
I think they went from 20. I think they went from like 20 to 12 or something.
Can we make some tiny hop from 28, into low 20s before draft day itself, or does he just have to swing big come next draft day? So let's just the big swing, man. Right? Is it next year's one? It's not throwing in next year.
Well, let me go over this.
No one wants next year.
This is what I was getting to. This is what I was getting to. So now with this trade, getting Houston's second round pick next year, they got more ammunition, obviously. They could take, and I went through like kind of the NFL draft value chart. It's not an exact size, but at least gives you
Jimmy Johnson, baby, a
rough idea. You take 28. It's not Jimmy Johnson, by the way. You take 28. All right,
you did it,
and you go to next year's 2. All right. So if you were to trade your first round now and next year's number 2, that like the pick they got, that should get you to about 15, 17, somewhere in that range. That's not a doomsday range. I can tell you that right now. That might be Michael Thomas Jr. range. So if you take 28 and 2, that's where you would get. If you took this year's first and you took next year's first, smash them together, maybe a little something with it, a 4th, a 5th, something like that, or pick swap mid-round, that's going to be what gets you into the top 10. You'd still have 2 2s in 2025. You want to have a 1, though. I think that's on the table. That's your top 10. You want to get to, I think, 9. Chicago Bears, they need everything. They got the 9th pick. That's the team. If Odunze ends up at 9, which is possible when not a given, that's the pick. It's going to take 2 first rounders. If there's a receiver that you love, Tone, are you giving up a first this year and next year?
Now
go get him now. Because that's what it's going to take.
I've said it about 7 times so far. Yes. Yeah, man. Especially with the 2 now. All right. Especially with the 2. That's where I value the 2.
Well, that 2 will get you to the middle of the first round.
I'm not trying to use it as to get me to the middle of the first round. I'm trying to say that it keeps next year's draft intact for me. All right. If I throw the 1 this way. All right, the Minnesota 2 just becomes my 1 next year, and I just have to deal with it because I went and got, all right, a franchise wide receiver.
Yeah.
That's what I want. It's mentally what the 2 allows me to do with next year's 1. That's what I like about the 2. I don't think next year's 2, their own or from Minnesota. I mean, if they do end up dealing it 2, we should want it to absolutely be ours, I think. You know what I mean?
Minnesota's not going to, they're probably not, they're going to have a rookie quarterback.
Even regardless of what the chart says, and I do think this originally was a Jimmy Johnson chart. All right. Regardless of what the chart says about you being able to get into the 15-17 range with that pick that they acquired today, I don't think an NFL, I just don't think a team wants to do it because of the fact that that's dropping 13 places without another pick, to this year's draft. I would say if the Bills wanted to do that, it might cost them another 5, another 4,
or they got a second
4,
this year,
something like that. Well, no, you're using that second. All right. You know what I mean?
So you want to get in the top 10 and keep your second round pick this year.
Yes.
That's not going to be easy to do. I don't know.
Next year's 1 does it. That's the pick. All right, that's the pick that gets you there. There's no fucking around with anything else. The pick that gets you your big swing is next year's 1, which you now think, all right, you can pull off because A, you picked up another 2, and B, what you can't fill in the draft next year, you can fill in free agency because you just freed up $25 million.
Look, they're going to take a wide receiver probably with their first pick. I don't know that there's going to be a big swing, though.
Give me a betting odd for dealing next year's 1 in this coming draft.
5 to 10% at most.
Okay, well then
part of the reason
throw
is
some money down.
There's AD Mitchell,
like plus 900 or some shit.
There's Xavier Leggett. There's AD Mitchell. There's Lamb McConkey, who might not have seemed like a fit. But guess what? He is now. Stefon Diggs is gone.
McConkey's a guy.
You ain't gonna go. You got to go up to number 10 or even 15 to go get those guys.
Maybe they want to go ahead and use like a 3 next year. All right, to jump up, into the high teens if they love McConkey, something like that. Maybe maybe we're reading it wrong, man. Maybe they don't have to really do anything.
That's what I'm saying.
With next year's 2 2s, but they are moving up. They are not picking at 28. Here you go. Give me the betting line for this. Give me the betting line for the Buffalo Bills are just going to take their draft pick, all right, at number 28. What's my betting line there?
I would be willing to bet that they move up. I'd be willing to bet they moved up before they traded Diggs because Brandon Beane always moves up.
No. I mean, seriously though, it should be better than it should be better than
they'll be willing to move up more.
It should be better than even money. It should be better than even money that the Bills are moving up. They're moving up all day. They're moving up all day. There is 0.1 chance that this team is drafting 28th in the first round. Ain't happening.
Well, let's say this. If you're talking top 10, you're giving up next year's first and something else. If you're talking middle of the first round, you're giving up a second rounder this year or next year, maybe a little something else as well. If you're talking 28 to like 23, 24, which is what I do think will happen, that's what I would put money on, a 4th, maybe a 4th, and then you give a 5th for a 6th back, something like that. That's what the chart says roughly that it would take up.
I think they're moving ahead of 20. I'm gonna put my money on the fact that they're moving ahead of 20. And can I also say something else about the Beane presser today? We kind of glossed over it. Brandon Beane very rarely tells you about where he's going to add. All right, guys. Beane talked about draft. He goes, hey, if you're able to do something in the draft or if someone becomes available in free agency that you didn't expect. And then my man just said we'll probably do one of each. I mean, he just said that. We'll probably do one of each. He told you that he's going to, we all know he's going to get the rookie. But he also told you that he might not be done dipping his toe in the ride receipt in the veteran.
That's what I'm saying.
All right, as well. So
he went out of his way to say a team might draft a guy.
The team's going to be fine.
He said a team might draft a guy, and then they might get rid of that team. Might get rid of a veteran because they just got a younger, cheaper guy.
The schedule became more critical than ever before today. I think I'm how I said during the course of the day I was semi-prepared for this podcast because I was processing a lot. Well, normally I'm, that's why I'm so all over the place. Normally I'm processing in real time when I come here. Tonight that has happened though. I'm processing a little bit in real time. And that is the schedule just became more critical than ever this year because there are going to be some early growing pains in the passing game.
So no at Houston week 1. You don't want that in prime time. By the way, you like to bet odds. You've asked me 3 times what the odds are. What are the odds that the Bills are playing?
Literally one.
It was more than once. It was at least twice. It was twice just with draft shit.
I'm ready to smoke.
What are the odds? What are the odds that the Bills play Houston in prime time this year? They're playing in Houston. We know that. Prime time game.
I thought you were going to say prime time in week 1. Prime time. Oh, it's near even money. All right. That one's just too chocolatey. Those two teams are fabulous, man. Those, you know what I mean? I mean, that's everybody thinking that Houston, is ready to take a step above the Bills into the top 3 of the AFC hierarchy. They'd be crazy not to put that one on prime time. And I think you got to do it early. Look, there's going to be tough ones early. I just need some, touchdown or better type, favorites in throughout the first month. I got to come out 4-2. Look, man, if I don't come out 4-2, then everybody's like, see, Bills window's closed. Fucking the heat goes up a little bit, and you got a coach who's going to start feeling that too. Then it really starts to get messy.
It's going to be the first time.
It really starts to get messy once that starts to happen. No, all right. You need They're
not going to be favorites this year. This is going to be the first time in 4 years. Bills ain't a favorite.
You need a fan-friendly start to the season, man. Sure, go ahead. Squeeze that week 1 primetime game in there because we're such a draw. And if we go 0-1 and then basically have the equivalent.
Did it last year.
That's what I'm saying. Give us the equivalent of Washington on the road and, the Raiders at home in back-to-back weeks. And let me get to 2-1. Schedule got a lot bigger today, man, because the offense is going to need more time than ever before to gel in the absence of Stefon Diggs.
I got one more small take. I don't even think his name's been mentioned. And if it has, it's just been in passing. They're drafting a receiver in the first round, and they might sign someone else. Don't sleep completely on Matt Collins. I'm telling you.
His name came up once. You did mention his
I did
name,
a whole episode on him.
It was only as part of the group.
Dude, 2 years ago, 690 yards with the Raiders. He had a
Matt
good year.
Collins might be, when I talk about the Bills dipping their toe back into the the free agency market, Matt Collins might be the guy that allows them to at least consider waiting all the way until their pick at 28. Because they feel like Matt Collins can go and catch footballs
until
the draft pick gets acclimated. I don't see it that way. All right. I look at that particular player and I see fans trying to find like an important role for him. And then I think to myself, you know what? Those are like drought type takes. Oh, like Matt Collins might be good. You know what I mean?
That is true.
I mean? Those are like
that is a drought take. That's a drought. That does feel droughty.
All of a sudden, Bean comes in, grabs you somebody way better than Matt Collins, and you're like, all right, Matt Collins is a 5.
That was a droughty take.
That's the way it goes, man.
That was a droughty take. But I will say to your point, because you said Samuel's never had a real quarterback. Matt Collins was good 2 years ago. Don't judge. He didn't have a chance in Atlanta. He played behind one of the worst fucking quarterbacks I've ever seen in my life in Desmond Ridder. Last thing, too, 8 captains last year for the Bills. 6 of them are gone. Josh Allen and Von Miller, the only 2 captains.
Yeah, 6 of them are gone, and one of them's like, I don't know, just fairly useless right now. Oh, here's something.
They got to count on him now because
here's the thing.
I had a
wanted to
defensive
say
end in
this.
the first round.
I may have asked you this, but I really like this take that I have on Von Miller coming into this year. Here's what I need Von Miller to be this year. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I need him to be last year's Leonard Floyd. That's all.
Yeah.
That's all I need Von Miller to be. Is last year's Leonard Floyd. The reason we can't go and replace Leonard Floyd and his 10.5 sacks is because of, the anchor that is Von Miller. So instead of, figuring out how to do that, you get you a couple bargain basement guys like the dude from Washington or whatever.
Casey Hill.
There it is. And you just say, man, if I can get that Leonard Floyd impact out of Von Miller this year, I'd be thrilled.
They need it because I think they might have just lost the ability to take an edge guy in round one.
But doesn't that tell us that they were never bothering with an edge guy?
I don't think that Brandon Beane woke up this week intending to trade Stefon Diggs.
I think him and the other team. I think this was months in the making. No, I'm sorry. Nope. I think this was absolutely all right.
Does make you think because they never
plan.
They never touched his contract, so that does make you think. Last thing, draft night. What's Bills Mafia reaction going to be? More specifically, what's Joe from Queens' reaction going to be?
I feel bad.
Defensive tackle.
I told Joe that I was definitely going to put pressure on you all episode to pull him up, man, because whatever, you're just being lazy by not doing that. Me and Joe and you would have a blast, and I think it would be good content. And the fact that me and Joe push this shit and you don't do anything, which leads me to believe that it might be a little work. All right. Even if it's just like more planning work or something like that, I'm left knowing you through the years. My thing is, it's probably a little more work that Pat doesn't want to be bothered with, but
I'm also a little scared of what might happen if you and him are both on the podcast at the same time, especially if he gets going on one of his media fucking rants about the Bills bro beat. And like in Joe's eyes, if I had Joe on the show right now and asked him about Diggs, you're talking football. This would end up being the media's fault.
You know what? Hold on. But let me tell you something. We never even had a chance to go there. You know what I mean? I think I may have alluded to some thoughts that I had on.
You just told me you wanted to smoke.
No, I don't want to go there. I'm just saying, maybe there is still a conversation to be had on that side, certainly with Joe. That was a big part of the story.
I'll be happy.
I didn't let you go. You know what I mean? I didn't actively keep you from going that way, but I certainly didn't want to introduce, all right, the two sides of the fan debate on this player, because to me, that's the least fucking interesting thing of this whole thing. I enjoy the football side of it far more, but there was enormous, all right, fan news when this broke. I mean, that's a big story, man. The way the fans, all right, have become with Steph over the past couple years, and the way that the media has is worth its own podcast. I'm just not the guy for it because it's uninteresting to me, but it is interesting to plenty.
Sure.
And, you know what I mean?
Let's put a lid on this show, this episode. Stefon Diggs, 80s song, or I guess any song that you want to pick, but give me a song that will remind you of the Stefon Diggs era in Buffalo. I put you on the spot. No, if you can't come up with one, that's fine, because I got one.
Well, just come with it, and maybe it'll get one to me.
But I'm an 80s guy, so there's an 80s song for every situation. This is a sad one.
All right, go with it. Whatever.
It's Tiffany, man. Could have been. You look back at the Stefon Diggs era. We're going 80s music. Tiffany.
I think I'm gonna do kind of the same thing that I did when we talked about Steph going earlier in the podcast. Is I just kind of group them in with the rest of the group that left at the same time. You know what I mean? And yes, that works for the whole group. For me, it's not going to be specific to Steph. You know what I mean? I would personally look for something more specific to Steph, but the could have been choice that you had, it works. But now you know what I mean? It's more if you include Trey
Sure.
and Hyde, who I'm not ready to write off yet, and Poyer and those sort of things. Like, is there an out coming with you playing Tiffany? I actually had
I
a
can't. It's
music
illegal,
take.
man.
You can't play songs at all?
No.
You're definitely using pictures that you shouldn't be. I know. I mean, who the fuck gives a shit? Like, if you go play Tiffany, like if I played it on my phone and held it up to my speaker, is it also illegal?
Technically,
like you did earlier when you held your phone up there. Like anybody read that shit.
All right.
Here's my song take. I thought about this, and maybe we'll make it a thing. All right, maybe we'll make it a thing. Songs you would be shocked. Songs I might be shocked too. All right. Songs the Tone Pucks could do shockingly well in karaoke. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think this one would you'd be like, no way you can do that song. All right. Pretty Brown Eyes.
By Mint Condition?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. I hit that shit, man. I did. I hit it a few times, and I do that every now and again. And I'm like, I really want to sing that song in karaoke, but I have no reason to ever be a karaoke, which is a shame. There should be more karaoke. Like, who doesn't love them some karaoke?
Yeah.
Everybody loves to sing. Everybody loves to sing, but you're never seeing karaoke's anymore.
There's one on the screen, by the way. Alexander.
I love
his song, Carry On My
Felix.
Wayward Son. Little Kansas, Don't You Cry No More.
Wow.
Let's end the show
don't
with
think I
that
can
one.
do
That's
it.
solid.
This is strictly going to come from me. I'm not taking, definitely not taking requests because I've got to know I got to play it on my very specific playlist. And
Funky Cole Medina. Gee, all right, we better get out of here.
None of that is happening. I had a lot of Sabre shit today. I would also have been prepared this morning. I was looking forward to this even before the Diggs news because I had all kinds of Sabre shit. I was ready to be like, oh my God, we've never opened with the Sabres before. And
I was in my original notes. I was going to tell you, I heard zero chance in the quotations that Skinner is getting bought out this summer. Zero chance.
All right. Well, I'm going to put it to you like this. You have quoted anonymous sources somewhere between 4 and 6 times so far on this podcast. I'm going to say that at minimum, 2 of them will be wrong. All right.
They're not. And
my guess is that's one of them. Look, my belief is that the franchise kind of gave Jeff Skinner his honor last night as part of, thank you. You've had some good years here. Yeah, and you've been fun. All right. You've been fun. You've scored big goals on big nights. And the between two ferns stuff, the goal songs, people have had some fun with Jeff Skinner. But we're moving on from you, brother. All right. They haven't, but we're moving on from you, brother. And it wouldn't shock me if some of it was a little bit of theater, okay, to some much needed infusion of veterans. All right. That says, look at how we treat our guys. Look at how we treat our guys. This team is stupid close, man. This is I really got to. They have absolutely found line number 1. JJ Peterka with those 2 is perfect. It actually has me believing that Tage Thompson, all right, is still Tage Thompson a little bit. That line is perfect, okay? Then you go Cousins, Cousins, Quinn, Benson. That's a great 6. Or, that's a great top 6, man. Then I got Greenway to start my 3rd. That's where I've got to infuse a little veteran leadership. And then I can have Gergensons, and if I want Krebs back to my 4th. Krebs can't be that 3rd. Krebs can't be that 3rd anymore. Look, there is a model that is very easy for Kevin Adams this offseason. I'm sorry. It's just it's almost as obvious. It's almost as obvious as the Bills' need for receiver. The Sabres' needs are almost as obvious, and they're in the bottom 6. That's it. It's that easy. It's that easy. You let a couple kids up, but you have found your top 6. It's been a painstaking year to do it, but you have found your top 6, and it doesn't include Jeff Skinner. it might not be a buyout, man. It might just be a Stefon Diggs type thing.
Sure.
Whereas they're not going to get the second, though. They're probably going to have to move something, all right, so that some other team can buy him out. That's my guess. A bad team takes Skinner on to buy him out if we give him a little something more. I just don't think Jeff Skinner is in this opening night lineup next year. And I think they just, I think they overdid the, the 1000th game thing a little bit for reasons other than really giving a fuck about Jeff Skinner.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what, we'll pick up the Jeff Skinner conversation next week. Bye. One more song on Francis. This was what I think a lot of Bills fans who were just pissed off at Stefon had enough.
That one came to mind right away.
Hit the road, Jack, for people listening. Hit the road, Jack. Francis came up with. That's a good one. One last name. Just came up on Twitter. I never thought of him. He is out there. Brandon Beane did say the season doesn't start till September. There is a pretty big name wide receiver that might be lurking around for quite a while. And we've heard him connected to the Bills before. Odell Beckham Jr. is out there. I just saw a photo of him on Twitter.
Let's say this. Let's say this.
After the draft.
What did I say? What did I say earlier? I said the one thing Beane told you in his press conference that he just never does. My man came flat out and said, all right, with regards to the draft and going back in the veteran free agency, we'll probably do one of both. I mean, he said it, man. He said we'll probably do one of both.
Yeah.
And guys that are still around right now, they're not 10 million guys, right? They're 3 million guys. I don't think the Bills will put themselves right up against it. But
the Bills could sign on June 1st, or they could sign somebody but make it a June 1st designation. They could give a guy a pretty good contract, and it could still have a minimum cap hit this year and future years. They got the money. So
and those guys aren't going to be, those guys aren't going to be dicks in year one year contract.
Yep.
That's it. 1 year contract, man.
All right, guys, that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you, by the way, to the 700 plus people that were watching us on the video side live. If you haven't followed us already on Apple or Spotify, please make sure you do that. I will be back with a brand new episode, actually tomorrow night, live from Imperial Pizza. Former Buffalo Bills cornerback Marlon Kerner is going to join me. I'm sure I'll have plenty to say about Stefon Diggs. We'll talk the draft.
I just got completely useless fantasy baseball trade offering of guys that you could absolutely care less about. And that is just something that just makes me think how sad I am that we didn't get to anything in baseball on this episode. I hate when this happens, when it gets in the way of my fantasy baseball, dude.
All right, guys.